So everyone seems to be really mad about this AI data center boom thing, right? You've heard about it, I've heard about it, it's all over the news, our friends are posting on social media. You may have even gone to some of the protests yourself. In fact, according to a recent Gallup poll, 7 out of 10 Americans now oppose AI data centers, citing water use as their primary top concern. And this opposition has been really effective because in the first quarter of 2026 alone, over 75 large AI data centers were successfully disrupted by local opposition. But my question is, why? Why is there suddenly this huge momentum against AI data centers sweeping the nation and the world? And why is it so strongly linked to water? We've all had lots of water issues in the past, and I don't remember seeing this big of a public uproar over it. My name is Cindy. I am a socio-hydrologist, so I was trained as a civil engineer doing water models and that kind of thing. But for the past 6 to 10 years, I've been studying the social connections with water. So I look at how people, humanity, and water connect through intricate scientific theories to help explain some of our most confusing water issues of the time. And this AI data center thing really struck my personal curiosity because I've always been a big fan of conserving water. I've shouted from the rooftops about conserving water. But this AI thing is the first time, at least in my lifetime, that I remember so many people being so united and so vocal about trying to preserve water. But AI is actually not society's biggest water threat. So, as we'll learn in this video, what is and why do we as a people not have the same level of outrage against those other things as we do about AI? And does this maybe mean we're going to be more successful this time? So I live in Colorado, and there's currently a massive AI data center under development. It's about an hour from where I live. It's called Global AI, and it involves transforming this 400 plus acre huge medical industry complex into a hyperscale AI data center. It's in this little county called Ward County. And people have been protesting there relentlessly, and they're all really worried about water. One of the main petitions against that AI data center says, water resources are already under strain. AI data centers require extremely high water usage for cooling, and northern Colorado is already facing pressure from drought, population growth, and limited shared water systems. And then the petition goes on to urge residents to formally oppose development of this center. And this echoes the general sentiments also from these big environmental advocacy groups across the nation. According to a recent op-ed piece in Colorado Newsline, the director of DC-based environmental group Food and Water Watch said, hyperscale data centers pose many harms to our communities, including enormous consumption of electricity, loss of critical farmland, and unrelenting noise pollution. But when we focus on water consumption, there it is again, water. However, the data center build-out becomes immensely more alarming. So as you can see from just those two examples, everyone here is worried about water. People across the nation and the world are worried about water, and they're blaming AI for it. This particular op-ed piece then goes on to suggest that a single AI data center can consume as much water as a town of 50,000 people. And this is almost the exact population of the nearby town of Windsor, Colorado, near to this global AI center. And so this number, one center taking 50,000 local residents worth of water, it naturally puts fear into our minds, and we start to worry. If this mega complex is going to use more water than we do as a one tiny town, then what will happen to our water? Is there going to be enough for us? Now, I have to stop here and point out that this statistic of a hyperscale data center using as much water as 50,000 people comes from a very popular report, which we'll cite down below in the description, and it assumes that data centers can consume upwards of 5 million gallons of water per day, which translates to roughly a town of 50,000 people. Now, keep those numbers in mind, 5 million gallons per day, because we will get back to them. But on the surface, it sounds pretty big in theory, right? 5 million gallons, that's a lot of water. And that number does have strong empirical data to support it. But it represents an extreme, very high-end, worst-case scenario of water usage, mostly by older data centers that used older technology. And it's heavily contested by the tech and energy industry for representing a scenario that is not equivalent to modern operational standards. Specifically, that statistic, the 5 million gallons per day, is based on data centers that have traditionally used evaporative cooling. And evaporative cooling is a method to cool the massive amounts of heat released by these huge supercomputers, and it uses these open cooling towers that are just open to the atmosphere, and they do indeed consume millions of gallons of water per day because a lot of the water is lost to evaporation. And across the world, there's plenty of older data centers using this type of water-intensive technology. However, more modern AI data centers are increasingly relying on this newer form of closed-loop cooling. And here, a much smaller volume of water is continuously circulated within a closed system, and you don't lose as much to evaporation. And in the case of the Global AI Data Center here in Colorado, the Planning Services Director actually publicly countered this 5 million gallons per day narrative that's commonly pushed by environmental advocacy groups by stating on record that the Global AI facility plans to use one of these newer closed-loop systems, and they project a demand of only about 100,000 gallons of water per year. 100,000 per year versus 5 million per day? Huge difference. And so, nevertheless, whether these numbers are indeed an exaggeration or they represent reality, people are still really angry and worried, and they're taking lots of action to showcase this worry in their elected official meetings and by raising awareness in their community. Why is that? Because even if these developers and these big tech companies promise a more conservative low water system, people do not trust these promises. They say, sure, you might say that, and you're going to get in there, you're going to build it, and then you're going to use as much water as you want to use. And so this distrust of these promises is actually fueling the whole thing to become less of a purely hydrological problem, so the quantity of water in versus water out, but actually a deeply socio-hydrological problem where our psychology as a society, as people, comes into play and determines whether or not we resist or boycott or protest, or we go along with it. And I'm not the only one that's starting to take note that this might not necessarily just be a math and numbers problem, but actually a psychological problem. While I was researching for this video, the New York Times had just published a new op-ed piece suggesting that this huge environmental case against AI may be ultimately misguided or maybe incomplete, and instead that the psychosocial case against big tech in and of itself, as formerly being this abstract cloud in the ethos, and now it's coming into our town and manifesting itself inside of a physical structure, and it's embodied and it's physical, and we can see it with our own eyes and we have proximity to it, that this may be a much stronger cause of the AI backlash momentum, and that this cause could have immense staying power. And so I said earlier that we were going to look at what are the biggest users of water if it's not AI. Well, that original opinion piece that I talked to you about earlier, the one written by the environmental advocacy groups about global AI here in Colorado, They brought in some additional water statistics for the state of Colorado that is key to understanding the scale of this situation and where we're headed. In this article, the author notes that the Food and Water Watch analysis, which is a huge, big conglomerate that is really famous for analyzing our agricultural water use, found that Colorado's alfalfa farms consumed an estimated 394 billion gallons of water in 2025, so almost 400 billion gallons of water in 1 year, which is enough to meet every Denver resident's indoor water needs for the next 35 years. Okay, so 400 billion gallons a year for alfalfa. 400 billion a year compared with 5 million a day, roughly 215 times as much water for an alfalfa farm, well, for all the alfalfa farms in Colorado, than for this one AI data center. Okay, why did this article bring up alfalfa? What is alfalfa, first of all? Well, it's this really hardy perennial plant. It's only about 2 to 3 feet tall. It's characterized by this very deep taproot system that can reach 10 to 30 feet into the ground in order to extract water from under the ground. Actually grow it predominantly because it's used in livestock feed, so it bolsters up the meat and dairy industry. And so we can quickly see that a hamburger or a glass of milk is just as much of a threat to our regional water supply as an AI data center. But before we get too far, I want to clarify one point. Am I saying that we should all just stop eating meat and become vegan? No, I'm not saying that. But I'm trying to point out the scale discrepancy between people being concerned about AI data centers compared with the amount of water needed to produce a single hamburger, because we have all of this underlying blue and green water that goes into growing the hamburger, manufacturing it, shipping it all over the world, housing it at your favorite grocery store, etc., etc. If you look at the Water Footprint Network online, they estimate that one hamburger requires around 700 gallons of water to produce. One hamburger times all the hamburgers we all eat in a year due to all this hidden water. And it was extracted from some farm somewhere. One pair of blue jeans also requires roughly 2,800 gallons of water due to all the water required to grow the cotton and assemble them and transport them. And you can see my point. All of our consumer goods require mass amounts of water to produce. They each have what we call in academia virtual water hidden within them. We covered the idea of the virtual water network in the Strait of Hormuz video linked above. Check it out if you want to understand how this works on a global scale. But in a local scale, most watersheds have some kind of farmland. And so a lot of water is already going to produce these things. We use water to produce everything that we consume in our daily lives. Some of the biggest culprits are coffee or alcohol or even the smartphone that you may be watching this on. It all uses a ton of water, and a lot of it is local. And then the question now becomes, how much of this finite resource of water that we all share across the physical world are we willing to give up and utilize for our standard creature comforts? And how much are we willing to be used for AI data prompts by people we might never know and by industries that we'll never become part of? In fact, I feel strongly about it not taking over humanity. I just lost my job in a very AI dependent field. And there are so many things to say about that we will not get into here. But my whole point in bringing socio-hydrology into the discussion about AI is because almost every single podcast or news article that I've seen thus far talking about the link between AI and water has focused on the numbers. And these numbers vary widely depending on who you ask. As you can see in this video, the numbers are all over the place. I tried finding the most accurate numbers for you. I have all the sources below. But still, depending on who you ask, the numbers vary widely. And if you spend all your focus on the numbers, then you can easily discount the impact of AI on water. And you can simply show a scale difference between how much of the world's freshwater use is consumed by agriculture at large, which it is thousands of times more than AI, versus manufacturing, versus other industries, etc. And you could theoretically build an argument that AI is not our biggest threat. So let's just all accept the tax dollars and move on. Wouldn't that be great? But I wanted to write this episode because it's deeper than that. And when we understand and think about how the human element comes into play, this huge momentum becomes completely impossible to dismiss. So to try and bring this down to a little bit more of a concrete visual element that you can see, I'm going to bring in a really popular construct we use in socio-hydrology called feedback loops. And it's basically where we take these complex scientific theories that describe what's going on, and we connect them in terms of their causal connections. So does this variable cause an impact to change on this variable, which causes a change on this variable? And we look at how these things connect to form loops, because over time those loops form systems and they grow and evolve, and they help us figure out where the system's eventually going to go, potentially. So we're going to look at two feedback loops to describe this phenomena. Why are we so upset about AI water and not as much about ag? Let me find my whiteboard, just one moment. Okay, so we got our whiteboard. We're going to go through a socio-hydrological loop quickly. I'm going to try to make this painless and fast for you because I know you didn't get on YouTube for a lecture, but I'm a nerd and this is the only way I know how to really explain it. So in general, humans' connection to virtual water, what does it look like? Here's the human. We want to drink the water, right? But the water is used to grow food somewhere, okay? And that food is out of sight, out of mind. We don't see it. It's a farm. It's beautiful. It's flat. It's somebody else is taking care of it. That food then gets transported further and further away, and that transported food eventually makes its way back to the human, but all these steps in between are so long geographically and time-wise that we don't really see or connect with the water being lost in the system and more of it going to food and less of it going to humans, right? Okay. The second loop we have is the humans and the AI water loop, right? So here's us humans. We want to drink water. But then AI is coming in and it's like, hey, I want to drink the water too. And then the humans, we don't know how we want to connect yet with AI. There's a big question mark here. Do we want to be part of AI and have the loop complete, or do we not? And that determines how we feel about how water goes into this. And I know that was super simple and straightforward. If you're interested in the theories behind each of these causal connections I just drew on the whiteboard and what the feedback loops mean more scientifically, check out my Substack in the description below, where I do a deep dive into classical economic theories like tragedy of the commons and collective choice participation through the lens of this AI water situation. So that was pretty simple, right? Just two loops. One was bigger and one was smaller, and we kind of didn't quite know how the arrows were going to connect quite yet, okay? So what I wanted to show you that on the whiteboard, that's how we think about things through the lens of sociohydrology. Because before this present time in human evolution, we tended to view the virtual water trade as conceptually very diffuse. Diffuse meaning we kind of had this sense that water was moving outwards and away from us in this scattered pattern throughout space and time, through these different goods that we consumed and through the way the world already worked when we were born. We couldn't quite put our finger on it, and we didn't feel that we could jump into this system evolution. It was kind of already in place and it had its own mind and body, and we felt that We couldn't garner any change without it harming us. If we went in and changed how water operated in the system, we might have less food. So who wants that? It seemed very elusive and global and interconnected, and it was beyond our individual sphere of influence. Thus, it was beyond our individual sphere of concern. But when AI came along, it was much more straightforward, the connection between us and AI and water, and it's novel. And it's more local and visceral. We could see it with our eyes. It was physical. We could touch it if they would let us pass the gate and go touch it. And we were able to put ourselves into the equation more readily, and we could kind of identify exactly where our role as humans was and where we could make a difference and where we could leverage our own power as a community and have these key pressure points to change the system. So we transition the humans more into an active participant in how the loop evolves with society, rather than us just sitting back and being a passive participant in some huge water industry manufacturing loop that feels way bigger than us and we don't have any say in changing or really having any genuine agency within it. And precisely because the human-water connection between AI data centers and people is so direct here, the feedback loop becomes that much stronger. We're able to see directly just how much local extraction of water for AI impacts our own local water footprint. And we aren't interested in contributing to that trajectory. But the point of today's video is that the reason people are so up in arms about AI data centers due to their local water use, but they weren't as much in arms about local water use for everyday goods and food, boils down to psychologically what we can touch and feel and where this coupled human water feedback loop is heading, how long it is, how close it is to our psyche and to our physical lived experiences. And we then can feel that our actions are able to truly push or keep the system within equilibrium or rolling towards a change that we want to implement as a people. In summary, the reason so many citizens are fighting AI data centers so strongly isn't because of a miscalculation of water volume for the sake of being confusing or elusive, but more so a localized and psychological attempt to reclaim our rightful positions within the greater water cycle in a way that connects all of humanity to one another and to the earth and to this elusive AI data cloud that we aren't even quite sure yet we want as a staple in our society. Peace out.